Hello everyone. Today I'm going to talk about how the Marana Karaka Sthana placement of planets can give you terrible or death-like suffering in a particular aspect of your life. And in this lecture, I'm going to talk about how the Marana Karaka Sthana placement of planets can cause premature death of your children. So if you have certain planets in MKS in your chart, then those MKS planets can trigger premature death of your children. And by premature death, I mean that the children can either die in their infancy or childhood or teenage or even in their adulthood when they are in their prime. So the intention of certain planets in MKS is to give you death-like suffering in form of you losing your children to death, and then you'll have to live the rest of your life with this sorrow, which is equivalent to death-like suffering. Now before I talk about the combination which triggers this unimaginable pain and sorrow, let me first give you some information on the MKS state of planets. See, MKS is a certain house placement of a planet that is associated with death or death-like suffering. And talking about death, the Devata who is responsible for what happens to us after death is Yama. So life after death or our journey after death comes under the domain of Yama, who is the Dikpala Devata for Mangal, the god of punishment. And both Yama and Mangal rule the southern direction, which is why a dead body is kept in the southern direction. And on the other hand, the Devata who takes us towards death, that is when we are alive and are moving towards death, the Devata associated with this is Nirriti, who is the Dikpala for Rahu. So at planetary level, it is Rahu who is taking us towards death. And because the job of an MKS planet is also of pushing us towards death, therefore, an MKS planet has the energy of Rahu. Now the term death is also synonymous to something which is vanishing from our sight. So MKS is also considered similar to the phenomena of solar eclipse. Because in a solar eclipse, when Rahu eclipses the sun vanishes from our sight. Which is why an eclipse is like a premature sunset, because it was not the time for sun to set, but because of the eclipse, it appears as if the sun has set. And which house is related to sunset in Jyotish? It is the 7th house, which is a Maraka house. It is the Digbal house of Rahu, and Digbal means the power to pull. So Rahu has the power to pull us towards death. And likewise, an MKS planet is also trying to follow Rahu, but the consequence of an MKS planet is not death all the time, and it can also be loss of something or death-like suffering. So how exactly the suffering related to an MKS planet manifests in our lives, let us have an understanding of that now. See, whenever a planet is in MKS, the first thing we have to observe is the houses it lords. Because the houses lorded by an MKS planet will go through destruction, and therefore the death-like suffering will come from the areas of life represented by those houses. However, if Jupiter or the MKS planet itself is having Rashi Drishti over those houses, then those houses will be protected from destruction and you will not see death-like suffering from those houses. However, in such a scenario, Jupiter or the MKS planet should not be blocked from a malefic planet, because then they will not be able to protect those houses. So if the houses ruled by an MKS planet are protected by Jupiter or the MKS planet itself, then the suffering related to the MKS planet will then come through the natural signification, that is the Naisargik Karakatva of the MKS planet. For example, if Mars is in MKS and its houses are protected by Jupiter, then the MKS energy will damage the siblings, as Mars is the natural significator for siblings. And if the natural signification also gets protected, then the house where the MKS planet is placed will then get damaged. And the damage to the house will depend upon the state and strength of the Karaka of that house. That is, if the Karaka or the significator of that house is strong, then it will protect its house from destruction. So this is the order in which we have to see where the damage is happening if a planet is in MKS. That is, if the houses lorded by an MKS planet are protected, then the natural signification of the MKS planet will get damaged. But if the natural signification is also protected, then the house where the MKS planet is placed will then get damaged. Now let me use an example chart to show the applicability of the rules I have just mentioned. This is the chart of Jaya Bachchan, a celebrated actress of the Hindi film industry. In this chart we can see that Mars, that is Mangal, is in the 7th house in MKS. And because Mangal is in MKS, let us see the houses lorded by Mangal, which are the 4th house and 11th house. The 4th house, amongst many things, represents our home and happiness. Whether there is sukha and happiness in the heart, that is seen from the 4th house. So something happened in Mrs. Jaya's life which took away the sukha and happiness from her heart, or damaged the sukha and happiness in her heart. And the 11th house indicates our friends. So some friend of Mrs. Jaya having a strong Mangal influence on his or her lagna could have caused an MKS damage in her life. And this is the chart of her film star friend Rekha having Mangal in her lagna. And it is no secret as to what happened which damaged Jaya's home and happiness. Now Mars is having Rashi Drishti on the 11th house, but because it is in debility, it is also involved in forming Sarpa Yoga and is also conjunct Saturn. Therefore, it was in no state to protect its house, and the destruction coming through the 11th house could not be prevented. Jupiter, being the 12th lord in the 12th house, made sure that the marriage doesn't break. With this example chart, let me now mention the combination which results in loss of children. So the combination is, if Saturn and the 5th lord both are in MKS, and if the Putra Karaka is also afflicted, then it will result in loss of children. So with this rule in mind, let us see some charts now. This is the chart of Joanne Aruda. Saturn is in MKS, and because this is a female chart, we will look at the 9th lord, and 9th lord is also Saturn, which is in MKS. But whenever the 5th house or the 9th house has dual lordship and one lord is in MKS, then the other lord can protect the child provided it is also not heavily afflicted. And in this chart, Rahu is the co-lord of the 9th house, and it is also conjunct MKS Saturn, forming Shraddha Yoga. So there is no hope of protection from Rahu as well. What about the Putra Karak? Putra Karak is Mercury and it is in MKS. Can the 5th lord come into the picture and protect the child? The 5th lord in this chart is Venus, but Venus is conjunct 6th lord Ketu as well as an MKS Mercury. So 5th lord is also quite afflicted to provide any protection. So because of all this affliction, what happened was that Joanne Aruda's teenage daughter was raped and killed. And this is the chart of her daughter named Mary Lou Aruda. Now in the mother's chart, the planets in MKS are Mercury and Saturn. And are any of these MKS planets in the mother's chart lording the lagna of the daughter? The answer is yes. Mercury, who is in MKS in the mother's chart, is the lagna lord of the daughter. And although in the daughter's chart, the lagna lord Mercury is exalted, but it is in MKS as well. And it is also under Papa Kartari from Mangal and Surya. See, the lagna lord is representing you yourself. So whenever the lagna lord is in MKS and is also under severe affliction or is subject to some evil combinations, then such a native can have a premature death. And Papa Kartari from Agni planets represent punishment of some kind, as Agni is punishing in nature. So punishment from Agni planets in this case came in form of the teenage daughter's premature death. Now is there a scenario which could have protected this girl? There is. If some other planet had conjoined this MKS Lagna Lord, then the MKS energy of the Lagna Lord would have gone to the planet conjoining, which means that the person represented by the conjoined planet would have died instead of the teenage girl. But there is no planet conjoining the Lagna Lord in this chart. Jupiter is aspecting the Lagna Lord Mercury, but Saturn's aspect on Jupiter blocked it from helping. So if you have such a combination for loss of children where the requisite planets are in MKS in your chart, and if your child is also born in the lagna of one of those MKS planets, then that child will definitely be in danger. And the planetary explanation for rape in this case is better seen from the Navamsha chart. I have already explained one of the dictums which can lead to rape in one of my previous videos, which was on the 7th house of Navamsha chart and your spouse, marriage and sexuality. There I had mentioned that if the 7th lord of Navamsha chart is associated with a highly inimical planet to the extent that the 7th lord is suffering defeat and humiliation, then it can lead to rape. And in the Navamsha chart of Mary Lou, the 7th lord is Venus, and Venus is in Scorpio, conjunct both the lords of Scorpio, Mars and Ketu, who are forming the nefarious Pishacha Yoga, and Rahu is also aspecting this Venus. This is a terrible affliction where Venus has no chance of preventing defeat and humiliation. And if the 7th lord gets defeated and humiliated, the person himself or herself will get defeated and humiliated. With this, let us move on to the next chart. This is the chart of Karl Marx, the father of Marxist communism. Many people around the world still believe in Marxism or Marxist communism that there is no God, that we are just animals occupying a certain body, and that we just have a brain which is slightly superior than other living beings. Now, why would an individual come up with such a philosophy that humans should live without believing in God? That there is no God? Is it because of some life experiences that an individual starts to believe in such a philosophy? And is there any planet which can come up with such a philosophy of denouncing God completely? Yes, there is. It is Saturn. And with the mention of Saturn, let us now see the horoscope of Karl Marx. Saturn is in MKS and the fifth lord Mercury is also in MKS. But Saturn here is in own sign as Lagna lord in Lagna. So this is a Mahapurusha yoga. But how will Saturn make one a Mahapurush? The answer is simple. The more sorrow and suffering you see in life, you become a Saturn Mahapurush. And then you may also teach the world because Mahapurusha means you can become a teacher of sorts, like one of the 5 heads of Shiva. So the high philosophies you will come up with from your experiences in life, you may want to impart it to people. But what will you impart from your experiences in life when you see not one, not two, but many children of yours dying? Karl Marx lived to see the death of 5 of his children, 4 of which died before reaching adolescence. So what is going to happen to you when you see 5 of your children dying? What is going to happen to your mind? In all probability, you are going to start believing that there is no God. Because none of your prayers were answered, none of your cries were heard, and therefore you start believing that God does not exist. It's all a lie. And then from this belief, you create a philosophy of communism called Marxist communism. Now coming back to Karl Marx's chart, the Putrakarak Rahu also did not help in this matter as it is with Sun and Moon forming an eclipse combination or an eclipse dosha. Conjunction of Sun and Moon with either of the nodes is an eclipse combination, which is a very serious dosha. Now there is another dictum Guruji had taught with this chart as a reference that whenever the Lagna Lord of Rashi chart is in the 8th house of Navamsha chart, then such a person is destined to see some terrible calamities in his life. So in Karl Marx's chart, Saturn as the Lagna Lord of Rashi chart is placed in the 8th house of Navamsha chart. And what is the sign placement of Saturn in the 8th house of Navamsha chart? It is Taurus. So we see where Taurus is in the Rashi chart. It is in the 4th house. And this 4th house is hosting the conjunction of 4th Lord Venus and 5th Lord Mercury. 4th Lord 5th Lord association blesses an individual with high philosophy, great knowledge and learning. But whatever evil is also manifesting in this 4th house from the 8th house of Navamsha chart, that as well Karl Marx was destined to see in good measure. And what is that evil? Mercury is in MKS in the 4th house and Mercury is the 5th Lord. Also, Karl Marx died a stateless person. Stateless meaning no home. There was no country which was willing to accept him and let him have a home for himself. This is again a 4th house problem as 4th house is home. So all this Karl Marx had to suffer in life from the 4th house of his Rashi chart. He had 7 children, 5 of which died premature deaths, and only the 2nd and 6th pregnancy, that is only his 2nd and 6th child survived, who lived longer than the father. Now to know why the 2nd and 6th child survived, we have to know the concept of garbagrakara, also known as garbagrakara. This means that there is a Karaka graha or significator planet for each pregnancy. So Sun is the garbhakaraka or garbhagraha for the first pregnancy, Jupiter for 2nd, Ketu for 3rd, Mercury for 4th, Rahu for 5th, Mars for 6th, Saturn for 7th, Moon for 8th and Venus for 9th pregnancy. To give you a bit more context about this concept, Prabhu Sri Ram being an avatar related to Sun was the first pregnancy of his mother as the Garbhagraha for first pregnancy is the Sun. Likewise, Krishna Bhagwan was the 8th pregnancy of his mother, Ashtama Garbha, because he is an avatar related to Moon and Moon is the Garbhagraha for 8th pregnancy. Similarly, Kunti Putra Arjun was the 4th pregnancy and Mercury is the Garbhagraha for 4th pregnancy. And we all know that during the last year of the exile of Pandavas, Arjun had guised himself as a eunuch named Brihannala, and as Brihannala, he was a dancing teacher to Princess Uttara, and dancing and being a eunuch both are related to Mercury. Coming back to Karl Marx's chart, Garbhagraha of 2nd pregnancy is Jupiter, and Jupiter in this chart, although retrograde, is in own sign, which is why the 2nd child survived. The Garbhagraha for 6th pregnancy is Mars, and Mars in this chart is Atmakarak and is Vargottama, which is why the 6th child also survived. So we see that the whole life of Karl Marx got marred with experiencing MKS. And because of his Lagna Lord being in the 8th house of Navamsha chart, which came to the 4th house of his Rashi chart, the MKS Mercury effect was also felt on the 4th house, which is why he had no country and no home. And regarding the 5th Lord in MKS, every time he had a child, the child had a premature death. So the MKS kept happening again and again. Normally in such a scenario, if Jupiter aspects the 5th Lord, the children can survive, but without the aspect of Jupiter, it's not possible. Now I would want to end this lecture by just reiterating what Guruji had mentioned while teaching this topic, that whenever we have an MKS planet in our chart, it is symbolic of the fact that we did some adharma in any of our past life, which is why a particular suffering is coming to us. So instead of looking for a reason outside, it is better we understand that anything bad happening to us or any bad state of a planet is actually our own doing. So this was my lecture on Marana, Karaka, Sthana and death-like suffering. If you like this lecture, you may give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more of such lectures, you may subscribe to my channel. And for consultations, you can visit my website mentioned in the description of this video. Thank you.